First of all, thanks everyone for joining today's session. Obviously excited to speak to everyone about this huge topic of rethinking ASO. Just from a quick show of hands, how many publishers in the room? App publishers, anyone in charge of publishing, or a few of them at least. So we're going to be talking about this because there's a huge shift that's working in ASO right now. And the goal is to help you figure out if you have the right organization or how you can adapt. So before we get started, I do have to go through a few commercial slides, so please bear with me. I do represent AppTweak. If you're not familiar with AppTweak, we're the #1 ASO tool. Basically, what you get from AppTweak is a platform where you can have all the data you want about App Store intelligence, but also ad intelligence, market intelligence, from data that's publicly available in the store, complemented by a lot of data science that's going to help you figure out how much downloads are you getting from your organic keywords, or what's the seasonality applying to your category, for just a couple of examples. So if you are not familiar with our product yet, we have a booth and feel free to head that way. We're already working with quite a few people, so I think we'll have some clients in the room, and obviously happy to catch up afterwards. We're also located in multiple countries, so if your team is, if you have a team that's also interested in ASO outside of Europe, you can let them know we're also available to meet in San Francisco, Tokyo, Bengaluru, and we're working on opening a few more geos. We got nominated, we got named ASO Tool of the Year last year at APS, so obviously we get bragging rights and we want to use it. More importantly, we recently released with Feature the Advanced App Store Optimization book. So it's a great ebook with 8 chapters full of ASO insights, everything you need to know about ASO, only $10. So get your copy at asoebook.com, and I'll stop the pitch there. If you're wondering who's this guy talking up on the stage, my name is Simon. I've actually been working at AppTweak for almost 3 years now, and I've been doing ASO for 5 years. So I've had time to see some changes happen. And today I actually work with AppTweak's enterprise clients, supporting them for their ASO strategy, whether in apps or games in different parts of the world. And my team is also hiring in multiple positions in multiple locations. So if you know anyone, sharing is caring, as we say. For what we're going to talk about today, though, I'll do a brief introduction with the question, what's wrong with ASO? Because if you follow a lot of ASO folks on LinkedIn, some people have started to say, is it still relevant to speak of ASO, to use this name? And then I'll actually go into what's changing in ASO, what leads to new organizational challenges, and eventually how we can try to change our approach to be more all-encompassing with what the App Store and the Play Store now have to offer. So to get started with, I started wondering what's wrong with ASO, not necessarily the field itself, but after I saw a few people that I have a ton of respect with, Anton from Feature, Jonathan Stormaven, multiple pieces starting to say, we should rename it. There's something that doesn't fit the name. Usually it's about the fact that ASO is kind of the younger brother of SEO. And it did obviously remind me of famous words by Shakespeare, ASO, ASO, why are you ASO? But in all seriousness, the question was really, here is the problem with the name or with what we do? And thinking first at the notion that ASO has historically been the younger brother of SEO. Seeing people say in 2022, that's an issue now, ticked me, because ASO is the SEO of mobile apps has kind of been the pitch for ASO for the past 5 to 10 years, depending on when you got in the industry. But for me, it's been at least 2 years that I've actually said, please stop saying that, because the reality is what started as a common philosophy that still applies and is still absolutely relevant has moved to very different realities. ASO and SEO cannot be done in the same way at all. And that's because in ASO, you get only one page per store. So you can't have one landing page for everything. And we're going to see how this may be changing now. You also don't control everything that goes on your page. The reviews and ratings, the layout of the page itself are things that are decided by store platforms. And finally, we don't have the same customer behaviors. SEO is about answering questions. ASO is about providing the best product available for a certain intent. And so that was really where I started saying, okay, we need to start thinking in a larger context about this question of, is the problem that people think of ASO as SEO for apps? Or is it more that we start saying that maybe the name ASO is kind of limiting now because there's even more coming out? And this is where we get to say, okay, there's been huge changes that happened in the past 6 months. Something that's actually been happening for more than 6 months is the divide between organic and paid getting blurrier. In terms of how it started, from almost the beginning, people started saying there is an organic uplift to paid user acquisition campaign. When you start doing a lot of paid UA, you can actually see your keyword rankings increase. And that already meant that the divide was not completely proof and could not be bridged. But then the big change was about 2 years ago, when Google and Apple really went to console data that would not show the divide between organic and paid anymore. So naturally, this is when a lot of people started asking, can I get a measurement of my ASO results specifically? And that got even worse after we got Apple Search Ads and Google UAC, because suddenly search is not only organic anymore. We tended to think, okay, search is always the organic, the rest is what's paid, and not anymore again. And it's both great because, in fact, it brought us more data, but it also made it harder to know what's organic and what's paid. And then last year, App Tracking Transparency hit, and suddenly paid UA measurement started getting a hit. And that was really a big change, because before you would say, okay, probably I look at my MMP data to know exactly what I get from paid. For organic, I can still look at the console, I will get a blended view, but if I do blended minus paid, then I get more or less an idea of where organic is going. Not anymore, because suddenly the data coming to MMPs is limited. It's not inaccurate, but there's definitely a gap that we can't identify anymore. That, and then a few additions in App Store Connect Analytics also said, okay, maybe we need to give more thoughts to what data we get from the App Store, from the Play Store. And now we go to here, iOS 15. I think everyone is probably familiar. And what I want to show here is not remind everyone of just what the new feature is, but it's actually what changes. And with custom product pages, Google Play also has something called custom store listings, which is not as good, but does show potential. What's happening is we're saying there's not one page for every user anymore. You're going to have to start thinking about segmentation. It's great because it means a lot more opportunities. It's hard because it means a lot more work to do, a lot more creatives to produce, etc. And so when we think about those challenges, it's really the idea of saying we're no longer bound by something, but we have to produce a lot more, and we have to think about what kind of audiences we want to be serving. So I put to the right of the screen an example I created. It's a simulation from the current creatives of Matchington Mansion, just to show that you can easily say some people are not motivated by some players are not motivated by the same things. Some may be attracted by the very catchy mini games you show in your ads. And so you want to be showing them the mini games on the App Store. Some might feel more like there's an appeal to the notion of there's a narrative part to the game. You get to design your mention. And so you want to speak to that as well. And you're going to be filtering who goes where. And that means that it's not just a question of how do I show everything? Instead, it's time to say, let's stop showing everything. Let's start showing just what people want and go deeper into what they want to see. Another thing that changes the in-app events. So that's the name for iOS. For Google Play, as a reminder, it's LiveOps. And what this brings is the opportunity to say, we're not interested in just user acquisition anymore. It's not just get your new paid users, be that step in the funnel, and then people never come back. It's actually time to say, hey, we have something that will get help to your game for engagement, for retention. And so both can be placed in the store before the event actually starts, which is very important because that means that you could actually start promoting something before it's live, create excitement there, and get people on the App Store, for instance, to get to click the notification button so that they are just immediately reminded when the event starts. Go in this app, start playing the game again, start enjoying the new feature, the new show from Netflix. And all of this really means suddenly we can think about lapsed users. We can think about even active users and just say, let's not lose them to a competitor because they've already downloaded our apps. They've not opened our app in the past 6 weeks. And now they're just thinking, oh, I'm looking for something. I don't even remember I have downloaded one app. Important differentiation between iOS and Google Play. On iOS, the in-app event can actually be targeted to focus on new users, active users, or lapsed users. That's great. It's not available on Google Play. What Google Play has, however, is the option to offer a discount, a giveaway, some sort of bundle, a free trial if you have a subscription to the people engaging with your event. If you're in gaming, possibly, for instance, completing a level, completing the special event itself. And that means it can also be a great way to promote the activity by adding a layer of interest for the player. It's already working super well. So here it's a focus on iOS, but this is data that Appduc has started accumulating on in-app events. And what we see is that among top 50 games in each category, there's already a good adoption rate for in-app events. And this is actually February data. We're probably going to try to get the March data very soon. We just wait for the month to be over. I'm expecting the March data to show a lot of rates above 50%. Also, quick reminder why it's good to do in-app events for your for people who already have your app on the App Store. Your screenshots don't show if someone has your app installed anymore. So if you have the card, suddenly your in-app event gives you a lot of real estate over here. If you don't have an in-app event and your app is already installed, you just have this very tiny frame where your icon appears, title, and that means that there's a lot of lost opportunity for conversion if you're not running in-app events. Now back to the situation at hand, which is the overall change. Here's what could change, because it's not over yet. So in terms of trying to do predictions for the year, this is something we kind of do in the industry every January. We looked at what Apple Search Ads could change, and definitely knowing that we have this new active or lapsed users targeting in-app events leads me to believe that it could also be something that will be used in the future for Apple Search Ads. If you add custom product pages to that, then suddenly you can really start saying, actually, we can just target specifically certain creative sets for lapsed users versus active or versus new users. On Google Play, custom store listing seems like the thing that Google will have to work on this year. What they have right now is incomplete at best, at least when you compare it to Apple. And it's actually interesting to know that they have some opportunities there. The user status targeting for a custom store listing already exists. It's just that today you can only specify you want to target only people who have pre-installed the app. That's not much, but obviously that means they're already thinking about it. Another thing that I pulled from my archives is this presentation Google made in 2020, where they had the idea of custom details page, which would be a different version of your store listing that would adapt creatives based on the creatives in your Google UAC ad set. There's not been a lot of talk about this recently, so it's really a wild shot to say it's going to come out, but it's worth knowing that this is actually an idea that's been in the mind of Googlers for a while. So again, we have to be ready for when it happens. And now the question is, being ready means having the right organization, and what are the problems we're going to hit? First is, who do we need to do ASO today? What are the skills? Because when we started, ASO was kind of something you handed down to some paid UA manager who would also have to run social media ads, any kind of network, and that's all fine. But the problem is now with ASO getting bigger, the focus can't be in every place at the same time. So we need to think, what are the skills needed and how does it impact how we do ASO? First type of skills is around data. I consider it's both data mining and data analysis. And that's because one of the first challenges when doing ASO is to understand what are the new metrics coming out from Apple and from Google in their consoles every year. How is the definition changing? When you lose the differentiation between paid and organic in search traffic, for instance, it's important to understand how do they make the difference. It's also going to be about understanding the measurement methods. It's really important to understand, for instance, for any ASO expert, that the volume communicated by Apple is an exponential scale. So the difference between the keywords of 32 in volume versus 33 is much smaller than the difference between a 47 and a 48. And that seems basic once you know it, but this shows exactly why you need people who are going to be comfortable with that data, who are going to figure out where are those increments you can target once you go to the keyword optimization phase and choosing which keywords to target. Finally, it's also going to be important to share with other teams what are the new metrics coming out now that we have in-app events. If in-app events are something that historically has been run by a different team, then you need to make sure that you can collaborate on how do we calculate certain things. If you want to understand what could be the conversion rate for an event, having the event on the App Store, you need to go into what are the metrics with them and decide what is our common measurement to make sure we know whether this is a success or not. Second type of skill is marketing. Of course, this is where I think most of us come from. And here it's really going to be able to work in the interest of multiple parties. One is going to be the product, one is going to be the brand, one is going to be the user. And it's really trying to figure out how to make the match between the keywords we want to target, the user interests that they represent, the intents behind them, and on the other side, what brand values we want to communicate, what's the USP we want to be pushing, and how does this all fit in these 8 to 10 screenshots, for instance. Finally, we need to have some product management skill in ASO, and that's because it's all about informing the rest of the organization on improvements that are requested by Apple or by Google. If you've ever lived through a panic attack from your keyword rankings because suddenly you had a very high crash rate with a new update on Google, you know what I'm talking about. This is exactly where you need to have someone who's going to be able to say, I'm not in product, but I still know that this is here and this is affecting my work. Another example is learning from the user reviews, where obviously you want to be sharing with a product team what users are interested in. And finally, it's even sometimes speaking about how to create nudges. And the most common example is, where do you put an in-app reviews and ratings prompt in your app? This is a question that cannot be solved without someone in product. This is a question that is essential to maximize your conversion rate in the store today. So if we now think about the ownership debate, in the old days of ASO, which are not that old, but we just move very fast, we had this very siloed approach where paid media would have their thing to do, ASO their thing, product and retention their thing. Then we started getting paid search. We started having more interest around reviews and ratings. The need to just also, with any type of paid activity, align on messaging. And suddenly we already started seeing that okay, the silo was not entirely working for everyone. We just need communication between teams, right? This is what we're getting today. Suddenly, we have ATT making reporting much harder for paid teams. So we're starting to think uplift measurement. This is also what ASO teams have been doing for a while. We have the custom product pages that need to be supporting paid efforts, but there's still the rule of Apple's guidelines for what can you put in a screenshot. So we still need to have custom product pages that are also informed by ASO team members who can help with the design rules. Same with in-app events, which also come from product, and a couple of other things that are going to add to the complexity. And so this is where I want to bring a suggestion, and I'm really interested in having questions at the end or any kind of debate that you want to bring for how we can try to have a better all-encompassing approach to ASO. First thing I realized is when we start looking at which teams are affected or which kind of skills we need is ASO is now just basically a subset of growth. So thinking about growth, just go look for how do you define a growth team according to Andrew Chen? Well, where you see growth right now, the middle between product, marketing, engineering, and data, it's actually not too hard to find all these crossroads that you start seeing ASO items. So we have creative optimization, that's basically product plus marketing. If we start thinking about technical things, engineering has been kind of a blind spot for ASO for a while. I like to remind everyone that Apple released App Clips about 2 years ago. It's still underestimated in my opinion. I know it requires a lot of resources, but it's super interesting to know that Apple is still pushing for engineering teams to be part of the whole ASO and growth effort. And so if we start thinking, okay, ASO is a subset of growth, then we can start thinking, how do we articulate our teams? And the answer is, we have this kind of template from growth teams about two kind of opposite views and the opportunity to do any kind of mix in the end. So one would be a cross-functional ASO team where it's basically this pod where you're going to send one ASO person who's really familiar with the marketing side of it to the marketing team, one part of the product that's going to work with other product managers, etc. Another would be to say, let's actually bring all these different opinions in. We don't have just one ASO person now. We have an ASO team. They're in charge of everything store related. Only that, but that's already quite a lot. And they work alongside other teams and have to collaborate first between themselves and then speak with what else is happening in the product, but know that they need to mix their skills first. I also think that it means there's a good timing for a new role, which I would suggest calling the ASO strategist. And that's because there is a need to stay up to date with what else is going to come out with iOS 16, what else Google is going to announce in a few months. And that's also because with every new iOS release, with every new Google Play improvement, not everything is valid for everyone. Not everyone needs to be doing in-app events right this minute. Not everyone needs to be doing custom product pages. Maybe you need to do PPO first because you don't have that much segmentation and you need to just figure out what's the best conversion for everyone. And that means that this is where you need someone who's going to be monitoring the new changes and going to help highlight how we can pull from marketing, product, data, or engineering and say this is where we need to go first. And it doesn't need to be all at the same time, but it needs to match the company goals. And it's more important because, as we saw, ASO is just growing in all directions, not always at the same pace, but always going in multiple directions at the same time. So in conclusion, ASO by any other name, that's because the problem is not in the name today. Again, I'll be bothering from Shakespeare, but more than rename, what we need to be doing is educating larger groups in our companies about the importance of having ASO in multiple missions in a larger scope and how we want to be organized as a result. That will be it for the presentation. I'm happy to have questions. And as a thank you for people who are interested in Apps Week, we have a coupon code that's available for about a month. So check it out if you're interested. Any questions?
I've got one question.
Yeah.
On Apple Search Ads, there's the new search tab campaigns. And they obviously heavily impact all the data that's in the search on the console. So now, in the past, that was all organic, and now that's paid plus organic. Have you found sort of the best way to continue measuring your search activity, excluding the search tab campaigns?
So search tab campaigns, I'm not even sure are attributed to browse or search because Apple themselves are not always very clear about it. Okay. I have a very rough opinion of search tab campaign, which is better not to use them. And that's just because if you want to be doing brand awareness, you can consider them. If you want to be doing performance, they just don't fit the profile. People go to the search tab to start searching for an app. So they're going to be looking at this search tab screen for about maybe 10 seconds. And that's being very generous. So this is where I'm saying, if it's performance marketing, you don't really need to think about it. If it's notoriety, it's one way to do it. I think another way is just to target other brands that may not need to be your competitors. Maybe you have brands that are kind of adjacent to your product. And so we could think, for instance, for a music app, like a music app teaching you to play piano, targeting something about listening to music. So again, Spotify, SoundCloud, all these. That would be a way to try to do it. It might be more costly, but at the same time, you get a better impression quality. So at that point, you can just go to App Store Connect, to ASA, go into the ASA console and see specifically what kind of data you get there. Other questions? Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so to what you were just saying about kind of the actual search moment, do you, from your experience, are people coming in more like to search, let's say, lottery games or something like that, where it's a little more broad and you're looking categorically, versus at the point of search, you probably already have a brand in mind and I'm looking for the London lottery or whatever it might be.
So it's always going to depend per category in reality. The short answer would be brands are more popular. When we run every few months, we try to make a data analysis from keyword volumes to see what are the top volume keywords in each country. And it's always, at least the top 10 is almost only brands, and top 50 has an overwhelming majority of brands. But if you think at a deeper level, there are differences between categories, because if I ask you to name music apps, I'm sure you're going to have 5 to 10 names in under 1 minute. If I ask you to name PDF apps, I think you'll probably have Adobe, and then we'll see. So it's exactly that kind of situation where it's good to know the overall trend, but it's always worth also digging deeper. And it's not about saying, I only go brand or I only go generic. To have a successful ASO, you need to try and find the balance between both. And this is where new things that are coming out, like custom product pages, are also going to help a lot with how do you get the best conversion from each keyword. There first. And
what about brand keywords cannibalization regarding the organic ASO?
Yeah.
What was your opinion, let's say?
I'm actually going to do a shameless plug and not spend too much time on it because it's a super interesting topic and there's too much to talk about in just one quick answer. We have done a study last year for the ASO conference on trying to come up with a model to measure the cost of brand defense and cannibalization. I'm happy to speak afterward to send you the link to the blog we have about it and start discussing there. You had a question as well?
I can't remember whether it was covered before. Is there a reason, or do we think it will change that they separate paid and organic search in the dashboard?
it's very unlikely that they're going to go back to the split. It would be something that a lot of people would be very happy with, but it doesn't serve the purpose of Apple or Google, who are actually trying to push for the idea that their advertising solutions, which include these search placements, for instance, are very good quality. And the problem they had with splitting it in the past was that you would actually be measuring cannibalization. And so suddenly it's harder to convince people to run a brand defense campaign in ASA if they see that the total amount of downloads they get has not changed by much, even though they're paying a lot for brand keywords.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no other question, I guess we'll stop it there. No, one more.
We have a challenge right now that we're not able to, like, if we are targeting or doing some change, for instance, in anything, like how do we evaluate when there are multiple factors like affecting it? Like, for instance, any change we do, like there could be something else happening around the store that affect the KPI, for instance.
Yeah.
Yes, so like, to attribute and not to attribute is a question. How do you?
How to attribute? One very pessimistic answer would be to say you can't. One more measured one is just to say, try to work with uplift measurement. When you don't know what exactly is changing, you can just try to see first, do we see a change after we did something? This is where ASO always tried to measure the organic impact because it was not being provided by Apple or Google. And then if you think there's multiple things that happen at the same time that can justify the change, try repeating one of them and keep iterating until you find which one is actually relevant. You're not always going to find the answer, but that can help, I think, find 90% of answers. And in this day and age, 90% is fairly satisfying and keeps us moving in the right direction. I think we'll stop it there. So thank you everyone for joining. And if there are any other questions, I'm free to speak afterwards.